right? Because I don't think animals would be afraid of dying. I mean, of course they'll feel pain when they get attacked by other animals or whatever, but I don't think they would be afraid of dying the way we are. We are afraid of dying the ego. Yeah, that's why people like stick a gun to their head, right? They really just want to kill the inner voice, the separate ego. Yeah, without the mind like projecting itself onto the future or the past, it's almost impossible to be fearful of dying, right? If you conquer the fear of death, you pretty much conquer the fear of everything else. They're trying to experience that boundlessness, that vast space. Yeah, because the location is a funny thing, because if there's no circumference, then there's no center either, right? There's no point, right? People think they're a point in like the world, but when they dissolve the point, we dissolve the center point, the circumference also dissolves. If there's no circumference and there's no point, there's no measurements. If there's no measurements, there's no locations, there's no depth, there's no distance. Right? There's no edges, borders, lines, boundaries, or any kind of separation. All those presupposes what measurements, right? And most of our discontent and suffering comes from measuring this against that, right? So the end of suffering is almost like the end of measurement, so to speak. Not just your cock size, how much money you make, how aesthetic you are, but spiritual attainments or levels of consciousness. Because ultimately you can't raise consciousness or make awareness gains. Right? It feels like that on a conventional level, because you can't get any more infinite than infinite for the infinite time. You can only shrink the self, right? So even concepts and names, right? You can't define something unless you measure X against that. So that also gets dissolved. When I talk about panoramic awareness, perception is not linear when there's no direction. Trungpa Rinpoche, he's like a Dzogchen master. He describes this perceptual shift to non-locality as the sky turning into a blue pancake and then like falling on your head. And he means it viscerally and physically at the level of sensations. Because the sensations of your toes and your eyeballs and the clouds, the wind, birds chirping, cars driving by, your thoughts, feelings, they're all in the same space, equally luminous. In the virtual reality world, when you put on the VR goggle, the depth and distance are the illusion created by thought, right? That's why I keep emphasizing, dissolving the center point through untangling knots of perception, or focus on the boundarylessness of awareness. Again, the point and the circumference, they go together. If you dissolve those, you dissolve and transcend every conspiracy theory generated by the mind. I think conspiracy theory is a really interesting thing, because like if you look at spirituality, like I'm not too into conspiracy theory, but like spirituality itself is like a conspiracy theory in the sense that it's asking you to question everything. It's asking you to think like, is the self even real? Is reality what it seems? What is the mind? What is consciousness? Who's doing this investigation? What is reality? And then is this all a dream? Like it's pretty much telling you to doubt everything. That's why like self-inquiry is telling you to like everything you directly experience, anything you can perceive, you just label this as like not this, not that, not me, not this, not self. Yeah, so when you join the corps and you start having doubts, you say that you're not for anything. It's kind of like how like self-inquiry is, like the whole spiritual pursuit is pretty much seeing how everything is quote unquote an illusion. Yeah, so yeah, it's just one big conspiracy theory, and at the end, even spirituality itself becomes another conspiracy theory. But we can get to that later. Yeah, so another way to put it is that practicing spirituality is like kind of like taking skepticism to the end point until you become even skeptical of even skepticism, right? But again, it's not merely a philosophical or intellectual exercise, because you actually have to like physically peel away the layers of the mind and body until there's nothing left, and that's how you become everything. Tell me a little bit more if you want, like your experience on Bufo, or what you experienced during that and after that, or yeah.
It was 2 sessions. I did one session. I just basically like scream cried the whole time. And it was the most peace I ever felt in my life. It's definitely a reflection of that awakening, or whatever you want to call that. Like I've never really meditated, and like naturally I set up in ayahuasca and started meditating. So I've done 3 ceremonies, 3 sessions of peace. And I'm at a point where I believe that I don't need that. And so like hearing you talk about that, I'm like, okay, like I'm not just out of my mind. Because I feel like people tend to go to plant medicine, like they lean really heavy into it. And I'm a
Hmm.
big person that I don't like crutches
Yeah.
if I can help it.
Yeah, whatever you can attain, at least in my experience, or experience on psychedelics, you can experience and attain them through meditation. And, I hesitate to even call it attainment nowadays because, both psychedelics and meditation, they're just tools to, peel away the layers and to decondition you, right? So you reach the natural condition of the mind or reality. And, from one perspective, you can say that, oh, yeah, I have talent in meditation and I'm a great spiritual athlete, whatever. I used to think like that. But nowadays, I just think of them as just tools to make you return to what you've always is, right? And my friend was describing his realizations and breakthroughs on 5-MeO DMT. And I was like, this is what I'm experiencing moment to moment. And that's what everyone is experiencing moment to moment without the layers and the lenses of perceptions.
Since March, I did March, May, and then earlier this month in early July, many nights actually. It started kind of where like I would go to sleep but I felt like clear-headed. In my subconscious or my dream, like I'll start like mapping things out here, like to like, because like I have a company that I've grown from nothing in December to multi-million dollars. And I've never done that in my life. I don't even know how I fucking did it. But like I'll like frame it through my sleep and like, oh, and I wake up like, okay, like that's what I gotta do next, and I'll do it, and it like within 2 to 3 weeks, like it shows a result. I'm like, that's very interesting.
It sounds a little bit like manifestation. And the way I describe manifestation is not as like mystical as some people might. I don't look at it as communicating with higher power or anything like that. I mean, I could put it like that, but I look at it as just life unfolding through you in a very natural way without a doer.
The thing is, my whole life, like I've been like a willpower person. Like I've willed through everything. I mean, I was an MMA fighter, the Marine Corps, high level Marine. I was a fitness freak. Where like now it's kind of like
surrendering, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like I almost think I need to do more. Maybe that's what I'm looking to do. Like, what I gotta do, and it's like, oh, I guess I don't have to do that much.
Yeah, that's why the Zen masters talk about like non-doing, right? Even when you try to do something, it just feels like you're not doing it because you sort of see through the illusion of the doer, right? There's no one doing anything really. It's just the universe doing itself. When you walk, is the universe walking. Yeah, it's not you walking. Every moment to me feels like creation. It feels like the universe is manifesting itself moment to moment. And if you look at it from like a more like pragmatic or scientific way, that's exactly what's happening. Your mind is constructing this whole reality. And if you can see that and really experience this insight, you pretty much feel like you're the creator of the entire universe. It feels like manifestation happening like in real time, like all the time, yeah. And everything's just, vibrating from non-existence to existence, from the unmanifested to the manifested. That's why a lot of people experience synchronicities on the path, right? Because without you interfering with it, every single particle in nature is perfect. If everything's a manifestation, then nothing is, right? You erase another duality there. Once your mind becomes completely unified, there's no more dualities. It's kind of like the movie Lucy, where like she upgrades her brains from like, I don't know, 5% to like 100%. I'm not talking about how much you know on the intellectual level. Although Shi Jinyan did say meditation made him like 10 times smarter. Just the overall brain processing power really do increase like exponentially. But if you look at awareness, it's quote unquote infinitely intelligent, right? It's not just like, because it's like, boundless, timeless, but it's also because it's so much quicker than like thoughts and feelings. In fact, it's instantaneous. So it's like you're waking up from the single thought of me to the entire mind, right? And I remember like going through my unfoldment, especially during the Kundalini phase, where I would go really hungry. Like I was craving a lot more calories to feed the brain, right? Because it's undergoing such a drastic case of upgrading, right? And the movie Lucy at the end shows like eating computers and machines, and the entire process is extremely physical.
Waiting for me to save God.
And as a matter of direct experience, it really does feel like the mind just opens up and encompasses the entire world, and everything is just infused with presence. And every single sensation through all sense doors are fully unified, and they're just like cognitize themselves like simultaneously. If you read The Mind Illuminated, that's how Chuldosa defines awakening as well. It's the merging of different sub-minds in the subconscious, and then just like completely unified into one system. And if you look at the ego, what is that? It's a dividing machine. I always talk about the aesthetic mind. And the most aesthetic mind is a completely unified and harmonized mind, right? Because all systems of aesthetics, if it's aesthetics, it's in symmetry, it's harmonized. That goes not just to spirituality, but to paintings, music, even physique, bodybuilding. And suffering is nothing but resistance. If there's resistance, then the mind is not being symmetrical. So the whole process of awakening feels a lot like the movie Lucy. And at the end of the movie, like, she just completely disappeared, right? Like, she was like, oh, they'll be like, where are you? I was like, I'm nowhere, or whatever, everywhere. The reason why you had those callings, I believe, is because your solidities are dissolved. Now you're able to do what you've always wanted to do, even though maybe you didn't realize that's what you wanted to do. When my ego stopped desiring things just sort of started to happen, that I was like, wow, this is like perfect. It was like synchronicities everywhere. It's like, this is how it's supposed to happen, because I didn't ask for it. You know what I mean? There was no expectation for outcome of anything. The nature is always going to take the course of least resistance. The only thing that resists is the ego, pretty much. I mean, animals, like, they don't resist anything. They're always in the flow, right? Like, even if they attack each other, that's the part of the flow, right? They don't resist resistance, in a sense, right? So part of the spiritual path is, I think, a major part of the spiritual path is just about letting go of resistance. And when you feel like smoking air all the time, when there's no resistance, then you get what you want, because you stop wanting anything, pretty much. And then even when you do those things that you're being asked to do, you do it with such effortlessness that it just feels like you're not doing it. That's why Adeshante said, like, before there was a personal will, and then the personal will started to get replaced by the divine will. So another way to describe this process is your brain and your body, your nervous system is just returning to the way it's always wired before all the conditioning is piled up. So if you were meant to be a very gifted swimmer, because that's how you're wired, then you're probably going to become a better swimmer, a more efficient one, and you can enjoy more anyway, without the filterings of the gratifications of the ego, right? And likewise, there's going to be a lot of things that you used to do that's going to start to fall away, because you're doing it for quote-unquote impure reasons. You're just doing it to maintain the separate self, because you're doing it for status, for fame, for money, whatever. People always ask, do I have to let go of this or that for awakening? The answer is yes, you have to let go of everything. It's not like you have a choice, right? Because true nature is going to snatch everything from you. Right? If you attempt to do anything that goes against the flow of nature, once you get deeper and deeper into the path, it's going to make you contract. And you have no choice but to let go of everything. But whatever comes back, it's yours, because that's what you were wired to do. Right? But the things that fell away, that you let go of, that didn't come back, you're not going to miss it. You're going to be glad you let them go. So that's how the personal will and life becomes one and the same ultimately. The relative and the ultimate are one. Yeah, that's the ultimate realization. The people talk about like the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind, the everyday mind are one, right? Because whatever your this consciousness and whatever you want to call it, this expansiveness, like a lot of spirituality points you to this like vast, boundless, like timeless, infinite awareness thing, whatever you want to call it. That cannot exist apart from the appearances, or like just the objects, or the conventional phenomenon world. They're one and the same. Yeah. So a lot of people, they run into this thing called spiritual bypassing, where they get so stuck up on the transcendental. They just like fuck the world, or like fuck materialism and things like that, and they just creating another duality. Yeah. So at the end, you should be able to perceive like the infinite in the finite, right? Like you should be able to have the highest insight. It's here. Yeah. It's not like somewhere else. It's not like, when you get into spirituality, you can't make money, or you can't like have a nice physique. You need that duality, man. To break through non-duality, you need a lot of dualities. That's why back then in my life, like I play the violin, but I also like do bodybuilding. Like I like to create those dualities in my life. Like it's how you see through both sides. When you, what I always say, when you push both sides to the duality to the extreme, they're connected, and you sort of transcend that bubble, right? You transcend the yin yang bubble, right? That's why I don't like the word higher self. Like, oh, higher self, lower self. There is no self. Right? Yeah. Like if you look at it, like athletes in the flow state, or like musicians, they play the best music when they don't have a sense of self, when they're in the flow state, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can expand that to like to the whole life, to your whole life, just moment to moment. You're just in that state all the time. So the more you dissolve, the less resistance you're gonna have, and the more manifestation gains that you're gonna see, right? And this is where like tools like meditation or even psychedelics comes in. See, when you're in a really deep state of like absorption, you know, where in a jhanic state or samadhi, your mind is highly concentrated, right? And when you visualize your goals, either during those states or, you know, even off the cushion, when your mind is just by default more concentrated than before you started the journey, of course you're gonna be more likely to attain these goals, right? In my experiences, that's really the case, right? Sometimes I have visions during jhanas, and almost exact same thing would happen, you know, whether that's, you know, coincidence or there's some kind of cosmic attraction or precognition, or it's just your brain becoming more concentrated and sharper. Who knows? Who cares? But that's just on the contraction part of the spectrum. I think the real benefit of contemplative practices is in the art of letting go and in the art of dissolving. You know, that's the expansion part of the equation. But again, expansion and contraction are one and the same thing, so they're not exclusive. See, what the ayahuasca and bufo, any kind of psychedelics, or even meditation does is, it does two things pretty much. First of all, it dissolves the solidity of the ego mind. And another thing it does is it cultivates energy. Like, you know, people go into meditation and they experience those jhanic states or samadhis, or even maybe a psychedelic experience where they feel a lot of energy, you know, the raising of Kundalini, or they see visions, or all of a sudden they become very concentrated, like they feel like oneness, unity with the universe. And I think you experienced that on your ayahuasca trip, and you feel like you were just like meditating, you know, automatically. Yeah, so in Kundalini Awakening, when all your chakras open up, again, that's just the sort of the symptom or the byproduct of that dissolution. And the reason why you hear people talk about like third eye in the spiritual circle is because for most of us, the sense of self is stored somewhere behind the eyes, you know, in the center of the head. Yeah, so the irony is that if you still experience like third eyes or seeing visions or feeling energy behind the eyes, that you haven't completed the process. That's why, you know, when people are undergoing through the process of releasing, they often feel like a pressure, like in their forehead, right? That's your separate self trying to escape. You know, after you're giving birth and you're made to believe that you're a separate entity, that's a traumatic experience. No wonder quote-unquote life is suffering, right? It's just traumas is, you know, manifested as a thinker, hearer, a seer, a doer, right? And when all that's opened up, either through spontaneously, it happened to me spontaneously, and for other people that there's other means. I've been meditating for I think 5 years when that happened. Up to that point was the most mind-blowing experience ever of my life. I describe it as stronger, more powerful than the DMT trips that I took. Wow. Yeah, and after that, my perception just like completely altered. It was just like a permanent shift. And when I woke up, like I was in bed for like a few days where I just couldn't move. It was pretty much experiencing death. Like I was quote unquote reborn. But that happened like a few more times after that as well. So that was just like one of the shifts that I had on the path. Like on the path, you die many times. And I believe what you experienced when you said you had an ego death, or whatever you want to call it, that's something like a death, you know. I'm talking about like psychological death. But some of the deaths that you experience can feel very physical. You feel like you're physically dying. Like I would like go to lay down, and then I'll be like, this is it. I'm not gonna make it. Like I'm physically gonna die. But again, those thoughts and those experiences are just a byproduct of your conditions and your lenses of perceptions and the mind, the dreamy mind, or the ego self dissolving. So it feels like you're dying. And the death of the ego is actually just as intense as the death of the physical self. And the only reason why people are afraid of physical death is because they're afraid of the dying of the self. Right? Because I don't think animals would be afraid of dying. I mean, of course they'll feel pain when they get attacked by other animals or whatever, but I don't think they would be afraid of dying the way we are. We're afraid of dying the ego. Yeah, that's why people like stick a gun to their head, right? They really just want to kill the inner voice, the separate ego. No physical organisms is going to want to like commit suicide. Like, I don't think animals commit suicide. Maybe exceptions of like dolphins, in like a couple cases, but in general, only humans commit suicide. Yeah. So on this path, you really have to be willing to die before you die, right? Like, but the only way to experience life at its fullest is the death of the separate self. If you're totally dead, that's why there's only life. Like Eckhart Tolle, he woke up because he was so depressed that he was willing to commit suicide. I think he was getting too ready to kill himself. I think, and instead of his body physically dying, he had an ego death where he was like blacked out in a huge cessation for like a day or something, and he woke up and then he found himself in non-duality without knowing anything about like spirituality. And then he was describing this like huge energetic shifts, getting sucked into a black hole. Just your typical process of dissolution, really, if you look at it that way. Suffering, I think, is one of the most crucial tool on this path. A lot of people that I talk to who like actually really made progress or have like legit insights, they went through like major like bouts of depression or like are they suicidal and things like that. Yeah, because that's when you really question, what the self is. Who is this that's suffering? You want to get out of it. So I always tell people not to waste suffering. To use it. I was listening to this podcast, and this neuroscientist was saying how like once you overcome like hardships or pain or resistance or suffering, it's almost like lifting weights. It's actually making your cerebral cortex like thicker. And once you overcome something, the next time you experience the obstacle, you're gonna feel less and less painful, right? Until finally you just don't feel shit anymore. Yeah, so another way to look at this process is just lifting suffering, overcoming resistance until you can't resist anything anymore because your brain is so resilient. Like you say, you see through the conspiracy of everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a...
Yeah, spirituality gets pretty trippy. Even your direct perception right now, or your thoughts, is conspiracy. Yeah. Buddhists call this the perception or your experience suchness. Like you can experience the suchness. The suchness of things is the ultimate reality, right? We think this computer is real, but it's actually just perceiving the suchness of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Right? And then people are like, how do I let go of the self? The self is causing so much suffering. Well, you never actually seen yourself, right? If you look at your own body or a picture of you and look in the mirror, you're just looking at the suchness, the representation of the quote-unquote you. But you never directly experienced you. It's a simulation of nothing. It's just a mirage, right? And this realization takes out a huge chunk of suffering because just like watching a movie or playing a VR game, you can have fun, you can react to it even, but ultimately it's not quote-unquote real. It's not going to hurt you, right? And that nothing's really happening. Nothing ever happened. Nothing will ever happen. A lot of people think this process is all just like, psychological in the head. Sure, it's psychological, but the root of it is really physical. That's why I always describe this process of being very biological and very physical. And look at the Kundalini Awakening that you experienced. The Kundalini release that you experienced was completely physical. The physicality of it led to some mental shift or psychological shift. I'm pretty sure the reason why your meditation has gotten really strong, or maybe you never meditated before, but now you're like, holy shit, I can meditate. The reason for that is also because of the energetic things you're going through. Because, like, imagine your true nature is being buried underneath the mud, and then you need to like break through that mud, right? You need some energy, you need some power to do that, right? So meditation cultivates that power, and psychedelics also to a certain extent. And the two are related, the first point, which is the dissolution of solidity and the release of energy. You know, they're really one and the same thing that kind of feed on each other.
That's something like my body's like I'm constantly vibrating.
Oh yeah, they're just more manifestation and symptoms of your subconscious mind and getting released. And I mean, you're physically dissolving, right? Of course, you're gonna, you know, feel like, plus you're getting closer to the true nature of experience, which is not solid, right? Everything is vibrating energies.
Sometimes I'll see like the corner of a wall, like, and I don't know if I'm fucking losing my mind or my brain's fucking breaking down and I'm actually dead.
Your brain or your mind is becoming more malleable. Yeah, so in a sense, you are losing your mind, right? This whole path of spirituality is about losing your mind, your ego mind. So that's why a lot of people experience like psychosis, you know, and the symptoms of like a spiritual high or a dark night of the soul is very similar to like bipolar disorder. Sometimes people get confused between the two as well, you know. They're like, am I going through a manic episode, or am I like going through awakening? And sometimes the symptoms are very similar. If you think about dream and reality and imagination, memories, perceptions, the difference between that, ultimately there's just difference in like solidities too, you know. Like dreams are less solid than real life, and then when you wake up, when you had gone through awakening, you feel like this reality here is actually losing solidity. It's just like when you take ayahuasca, it's like trippy, right? Things like morphing into each other, right? And you see like, you know, the walls are like breathing. That's because your mind is very soft at that moment. Right? Your mind is going under through in this dissolution, right? And when you do meditation, same thing, right? So in the process of awakening, things becomes less and less solid. Right, more and more dreamlike, yeah. But ultimately, you raise that duality too between like what's dream and what's reality, because that's just another construct. Yeah.
But I remember in Bufo, like I remember feeling like my body like shaking and like it was like finally like relief.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Some nights in my sleep, I feel that like I'll wake up and I feel like I'm like I don't know if I'm having like the ego death or whatever, but like I'll wake up and I'm like, oh shit, like I'm going somewhere. Or I'll wake up and I'm like, oh shit, I'm somewhere right now. Like what the fuck, man?
That's also another part of the another experience where it's just a byproduct of dissolution. Like you think you're sitting on a chair right now in a room, but in the layer of reality that's actually closer to what reality actually is, you're actually just floating in infinite space. In my experience right now, there's no ceiling, there's no wall, there's no windows. I mean, yeah, there is on the conventional level, like, but they're appearances. They're more like just lights dancing, more like, you know, when you put on a VR goggle and you sit in a room, you know that's a virtual representation, right? But then you know that's really just made up of dancing pixels and like lights flickering, and the same thing is happening in direct experience. So you're actually just like vibrating out of the void as the void right now, like you're nowhere right now. But then when you go through this process of dissolution, when the ego started to dissolve, you're gonna feel like there's gonna be experiences of like out-of-body experiences where you're gonna feel like you don't know where you are, either in your dreams or when you wake up, like exactly the way you describe it. Yeah, because you actually don't know where you are, right? Other than the definition, the names, and like, you know, like the water bottle. This is only a water bottle because the concept I slap on it, and because like, you know, because I perceive it as being separated than everything else, right? And same thing with your physical like location in space and even in time, right? You know, where does this moment end, the next one begins, right? All that stuff. That's why people go through those like time space like warps when like they take psychedelics or afterwards, or when they meditate. Yeah, that's again just a symptom of the dissolution of separation. Yeah. But even like out-of-body experiences, time dilations, jump into different dimensions, lucid dreaming, astral projections, they're just experiences. I mean, they're fun, but they all still belong to the dream world, right? Because how can you have time dilation or distortions when it's timeless, like on the ultimate level, right? And how can you have an out-of-body experiences when you were never inside the body nor outside? Even stuff like breath work. You know, Wim Hof breathing, alkaline breathing, those breathworks are really good for releasing conditionings. And at first, you're going to see a lot of trippy visuals and stuff, you know, visions and fractals. But then after a while, you know, they start to dissolve and you don't experience those much anymore, right? Because your body has been released, right? So in a sense, when we get high on any kind of drugs or alcohol or even meditation, you're just tripping on your own conditionings and your own karma. That's why it feels fucking great, right? And some of those conditionings are cultural and ideological, right? If you're someone who was brought up in a Christian family or a Buddhist family, when you have those experiences, you're going to interpret them as seeing Jesus or Buddha. Right? Or if you're someone who really loves aliens, then when you have a psychedelic trip or a meditative experience, you might think you're communicating with aliens or entities. And if you think everything is consciousness, that's what you can experience. Or just the content of your subconscious getting released. So I'm not making any claims about the existence of aliens or not. That's irrelevant. If an alien was to appear in front of me, it would be as empty and distinguishable and as full as me looking at a screen or me looking at another person or a dog, because they're just content. Right? Truth, which is the context, applies everywhere throughout the multiverse. But again, content and context are one and the same. So unless a separate self is falling away permanently, whatever that hasn't fallen away is always going to produce those experiences. And another part of that solidity is always going to interpret those experiences. Every single mystical experience, without exceptions, that you ever experience on a spiritual path belongs to the dream. And you just let them unfold and let them dissolve without trying to interpret them in any way or try to verify them into some kind of truth, into the nature of reality, because you just can't know what those experiences actually are unless you've transcended them all. The question is, are you able to let go of your own projections? Can the mind stop grasping onto any kind of experiences or realization and morph it into some kind of cosmology? Because at the end, that's going to bring suffering. There's always going to be a very subtle part of you that's measuring what you know against what other people don't know. But if you let go of that, your awakening or your realization, it's going to take a sharp turn into territories that you never expected.